For more on this issue, I want to bring on Republican New Mexico Senate candidate Dr. Gavin Clarkson. Dr. Clarkson, thank you very much for joining us tonight. So still a pretty crowded Democratic field. It's been ups and downs. It looks like right now Bernie Sanders is the front runner. What's been your takeaway regarding this field in general?
Well, it's basically been a socialist cage match on the left, and who can go the farthest to the left. I think it was very telling when they asked all of the folks on the Democrat stage who was willing to provide Medicare for all, including coverage for illegal aliens. And as somebody who lives on the border, I can tell you that the rampant asylum fraud is definitely something that I would be trying to fix in the United States Senate. The other thing, it was quite interesting to hear Michael Bloomberg start disparaging farmers, but it's nothing new. The bicoastal elitists have been looking down at their noses at people who work with their hands all the time. And every economy needs people who can build and fix and make and raise and grow things. And I'm a college professor, but I've been teaching vocational education as well for about 30 years. In fact, I'm an endangered species. I'm a Christian conservative, pro-life, pro-gun, pro-Israel Republican college professor. And that's a pretty strong contrast with the Democrat field.
And I know that you do speak on the issue of the economy and immigration as well very extensively. It's something that you've talked about in the past. And now it seems like those are going to kind of be the two big issues going into 2020. I guess the economy is always a major issue. But 2016, immigration was really the catalyst for President Trump. And it seems that it's kind of fallen out of vogue a little bit ever since then. I mean, we're not talking about the border wall the same way that we used to be. I think it's maybe because impeachment and all those other things were kind of overlapping. Do you think those will be the same two type of topics going into 2020?
Well, absolutely, jobs is going to be the number one issue. Part of the reason I'm running for the United States Senate is because 95% of my students can't get a job in New Mexico when they graduate. New Mexico, although we are having an economic resurgence because of the oil, the oil and gas sector, but that's entirely due to President Trump's energy dominance policy that I was part of when I was President Trump's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Economic Development. So jobs is definitely going to be a big issue. New Mexico is 50 out of 50 in all the wrong economic categories. But I do think immigration is still going to continue to be a big deal. If you remember the waves of illegal immigrants and fraudulent asylum seekers, they tend to come during certain times of the year. And so last year at this time, we were being inundated with, maybe sometimes up to 1,000 or 2,000 people dropped off in my hometown of Las Cruces every week. And that continued to go through late May. I think this time around, we will not see the same waves that we saw before because of the president's executive actions that have tried to stop the fraudulent activities that are happening on the border, and also because his economic policy has allowed us to take a stronger position vis-a-vis our counterparts in Mexico, and Mexico is actually doing something to try and stem the flow of illegal aliens. You also have agreements that are being put in place with Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And so I do think that the immigration issue is still going to be a major issue, but a lot of it is going to be, what are you going to do about the millions of illegal aliens that gamed the system and came across or just simply cheated the system? And now my wife is a legal immigrant. She followed the rules to come to the U.S., and she, like most legal immigrants who have become citizens in New Mexico, they hate the fact that people are able to cheat and game the system and that they're simply just showing up for free stuff. And that's something that is going to be front and center in the election in 2020.
And over the weekend, too, there was an interview, I believe it was on Telemundo, where the reporter was talking to three of the presidential candidates, Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, and Tom Steyer. And only Pete Buttigieg was able to name the Mexican president, which I think is a little bit telling, that a lot of times they're willing to talk about these talking points. You know what I mean? Kind of say, oh, the president may be racist, or he doesn't know what's going on necessarily. But they don't necessarily have any way to combat the policies that he's saying. Because when you look at, for example, immigration, at first people were saying that the national emergency was a hoax, that it wasn't a real thing. And then over the summer, we saw that number uptick. We saw that it very much so was a very serious situation. So when it goes to addressing these issues, too, do you think that Republicans should be focusing on the hypocrisy of these policies, the fact that they just don't work? What do you think the GOP strategy should be big picture?
Well, it's definitely always a good thing to point out that if it wasn't for double standards, the radical left would have no standards at all. And I do think that Republicans need to be able to talk about these issues, but they need to be able to talk about it in a way that is grounded in reality and grounded in facts, and be able to respond to the charges of racism. In my case, unlike Elizabeth Warren, I actually am an enrolled tribal member, And when people accuse me of taking a racist position on the border, I whip out my tribal ID card and respond in Spanish that la mitad de mis compañeros en mi campaña son hijos o nietos de inmigrantes legales. And they don't expect somebody like me to be able to carry on a conversation in Spanish. In fact, I've challenged my likely Democrat opponent, Ben Ray Lujan, to debate these issues in Spanish. And I'll even have Telemundo moderate. I'm fairly certain he won't ever take me up on that issue or on that debate opportunity.
Something tells me you're not going to get that invite either. I mean, unfortunately, it's the way it is. People don't like allowing other people to kind of share their opinions in a social network, whether it be online or in person. But for all of our viewers, too, if you want to learn out more about this campaign right here, it's GavinClarkson.com. You can find out more about the Senate campaign as well as your positions. Gavin, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. And again, have everybody go to GavinClarkson.com.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Gavin.